I'm Dr. Jacqueline Duget. Welcome to What is Black podcast that focuses on issues important to raising healthy and thriving Black children and adolescents. As a pediatrician and mom of color, I saw the need to create an additional educational platform to reach parents raising kids of color to address issues and challenges that are not always discussed in the pediatrician's office. Thank you for joining us for this week's conversation. Welcome to episode 29 of What is Black podcast. Have you ever imagined what you would tell Black parents visiting from another planet, what it's like to raise Black children, what your experiences are like, and what they might experience? Well, our guest today, Janet Stickmon, did. She did the work for us. And today we're going to chat about her new book, To Black Parents Visiting Earth, Raising Black Children in the 21st Century. I think it's a very intriguing conversation and a very interesting approach to how we would rethink parenting Black children. So I hope you enjoy the conversation.
My name is Janet Stickmon. I am a professor of humanities at Napa Valley College. I've been teaching there for about 14 years. And there I teach Intro to Africana Studies, Filipino-American Studies. I also teach a couple of survey and ethnic studies courses where we take a look at a variety of different ethnic groups, but also look at the intersections of patriarchy and heterosexism and classism and all those different things as we're understanding ethnic identity. Let's see. I also have been a writer. I've been a writer for a little over 20 years. I specialize in creative nonfiction, and in particular, my topics range from everything from education to self-love and self-care, ethnic identity, multiracial identity, and social justice in general. I'm also the faculty director of the Cultural Center at Napa Valley College, and I also lead or facilitate writing workshops at various spaces, particularly libraries.
So I think you do bring a lot to the table when it comes to the book. So if you can give our listeners a little bit of background about what to Black Parents Visiting Earth is about.
Definitely. So To Black Parents Visiting Earth, Raising Black Children in the 21st Century is basically a collection of letters that focuses on everything from the politics of hair to education, generational wealth, and self-care, and everything in between. And so basically, I imagine what if Black parents from other planets came to the United States in this current political climate, what kind of advice would I offer them in terms of how to safely navigate the country, navigate the world, and raise our children to be happy and confident and proud, especially against this extreme backdrop of anti-Blackness right now. So that's, in summary, what the book touches upon.
What was the other than, I think, the political, we've been experiencing undercurrents of racism, structural racism for a long period of time. What was the impetus now to write the book?
For me personally, the impetus was being a mom and having a child. My daughter was born in 2008, and as when she was born, Obama is president. And so I was feeling very hopeful about the fact that we have this Black president that's leading the nation. And, as things unfolded, especially as we then entered the Trump administration, I think the urgency to talk about these issues was very much there. And I think prior to that, understanding and witnessing the various things my daughter was coming up against in school, not so much in those a little bit in those first 5 years before kindergarten, but most certainly once we hit kindergarten, first, second, third, well into the fifth grade, the ways in which she has to be equipped with language and a particular value system to make sure that she's inoculated against internalized racism. We certainly didn't want her, as a result of people's misconceptions and just willful ignorance. We didn't want her internalizing all these different things about her identity that would ruin her, that would destroy her. So I'd say that's where the urgency came from. But absolutely, this is something that Black folks have been dealing with for centuries. In terms of how to make sure that we're not consumed by white dominant ideology and its impact on us.
And I think a lot of parents can relate to that. You know, my being a parent as well, I can totally relate to those in some ways, some anxieties and fears. Of the current climate, but even discrete incidents of racism, right? As my children were younger and growing up, and I'm always fascinated by how, as we become parents, or if we have kids in our lives that we are the responsible for, or they're part of our family, your view does change, right? Your perspective on how you've lived before, whether it be financial, whether it be cultural, whether it be your belief system, totally, I think in some instances for me, like totally changed once I became a parent. And I was just wondering, how have you found that experience being a parent influencing your choices, and then also some of the choices you made in terms of what you've written about in the book?
Okay. So I'd say that being a parent has directly, actually, let me put it this way. Having this life that I carried around for truly 10 months, we're talking 40 weeks, this baby was, in me, and her, being able to, once she's born, just nurture her and instill her with all the love that I can. Likewise with my husband, instilling all of the love and affection and knowledge, into our daughter. We wanted to make sure that this is something that that sort of love and that sort of care would carry on with anyone we would allow into her space. So basically, we're the gatekeepers, and so we would know, who we would give the green light as to who it is we would allow into her space, and who we would not allow into her space, knowing that whoever it is that we do allow into her space is going to have the same mission or objective to take care of our little one, and have her best interests, have her heart in mind. And so as far as that being central to my personal parenting style, I think that's something that was at the forefront of my mind. I know that when I look back at my own childhood and how my parents raised me, they did. I think that they did a really good job considering the modest access they had to various things. I mean, we didn't have medical insurance. I mean, there was Medi-Cal, but there was no real medical insurance. There was, we were low income. They both worked, but they kind of pieced things together to make ends meet. And, even though we had very little, there was a lot of love that I received from both my mother and my father. And one thing that I did learn from my parents, particularly my mother, was, through her putting me in all these different activities, I learned that there was nothing that I could not do. I was always encouraged and to get involved in different activities. And through these different activities, I was able to see myself progress. And I think that was a huge gift that I received from both my parents, but in particular my mother. I think another lesson, again, there's nothing I can't do, that I have a whole host of options available to me. And so these are things that I remember that they're part of my psyche. And so I want to make sure that as a mom, I instill those values or I communicate those lessons to my own child, because I never want her to feel limited to, being a certain thing, whether it's career-wise or limited to a certain set of characteristics, because these are the stereotypes that people have about her and us as a people. I want her to always know that she exceeds all of those boundaries and expectations.
I think that's a great perspective, because I talk about sometimes there are these fears, right, that we have for our kids, not only because of gender or race or stereotypes, right, that people might have about them, but ultimately what I'm hearing you say is that it's really love, right? I think a lot of the letters that you write, in some ways, even though you don't call them love letters, I think in some ways, like I sort of envisioned them and read them as love letters, right? Because either there was an urgency and, from the beginning, like why it is you needed to get this out. And that urgency, to me, that was really girded in or enveloped in love and writing the letter.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you for mentioning that. I think I only say it once in the book, and that's in the first letter. And I refer to all the letters that come thereafter as a love letter life guide. And that's essentially what the book is. And I really tried, well, I don't know if if try is the right word. As I was writing each letter, I wanted to make sure that that's where my heart was at. That it came from a place of love. It came from a place of, listen, I would, if there's anything that I can do to spare you the headache and the heartache that we went through in terms of learning all these things as we went, then here you go. This is what I'll give to you. Take it, trash it, augment it, do whatever it is that you need to do. But at the very least, you at least have a little something to work with, so you won't be surprised. And so, most certainly, this whole book came from a place of love.
And I'm just wondering, how were you able to sort of get that perspective, as opposed to, because you're writing from for me, when I'm inferring that you're writing from your own experience, but at the same time having to then kind of change the frame of mind to say that these experiences you've had, but you also want to be a guide for other people. So I'm just wondering how were you able as a writer to incorporate that perspective in writing your letters?
Yeah, I think the reason why I chose not to write directly to other Black parents in the here and now here in the United States was because I didn't want to come across as if I was an expert who knew all there was to know about parenting. Especially since I was a new parent, and I was a parent of an only child, all these different things. So at the same time, I knew that I had a perspective to share that would be of benefit to other people within the Black community. And so what I decided to do was think, okay, well, what if I wrote to these imaginary Black parents visiting from other planets, other galaxies? What would I say to them? And for some reason, that seemed to relieve some of the pressure of being thought of as an expert. I'd still be indirectly speaking to other Black parents in the here and now, of course, but I'm speaking to these imaginary Black parents visiting from other planets in some way or another, knowing that they, of course, would rely on my guidance. There would be no question in my mind that they would rely on my guidance because they know nothing about what's going on here on earth. So I think it freed me up a little bit to speak from a place of authority and at the same time create a space for other Black folks here on earth, here in the United States, to chime in. So I can say, yeah, I'm speaking from a place of authority, experience, as a mother, as an educator. But listen, I hope that other Black folks, regardless of the generation, regardless of where we are in the U.S., regardless of where we are in the world, I hope that they'll start writing letters to you too. Because, as long as you get letters from all of us, then you'll get the most comprehensive picture of what life here as a Black parent is like.
One thing I was thinking about as I was reading the book was that you referenced in one of the chapters the Green Book, right? That was used as sort of as a guide for African Americans traveling in the South. And in many instances, I saw a parallel in this book, right? In the sense that in some ways like a metaphorical Green Book for someone who's coming, and wants to know, like, how am I guided through these different aspects of the development, right, of my child or certain experiences. And I was wondering, had you thought about that in writing the book, about how those parallels at all?
To be honest, no, not until you mentioned it. And I want to thank you for for seeing it that way. That actually, as I'm listening to you speak, that's quite an honor that you saw it that way, that you saw the parallels in that fashion. As you mention it, I mean, that's, my hope was for it to be a guide that would help, like the Green Book, it would guide folks to where the safe places are. Where are the resources? Where are the people who are going to welcome us? Where are the people who are going to actually, not hurt us? And so I think, this book does serve as a guide to help other Black parents to avoid the pitfalls that may otherwise be waiting for us if we did not know what to move around or how to navigate through it, and still end up on top. I think the guide, the book serves as a guidebook to ultimately have us always end up on top and not fall victim to various things because, I didn't know, I was surprised. No, here are some things, especially, when it comes to education and other things that we need to be aware of. And this is how we can respond quickly.
Which I think is great. And I think, the other aspect, too, is that, again, you talk about practical, relatable resources for families, whether it be music, media, places to go and, in certain geographic areas. And I think that's helpful because I think in many instances, right, I think it could be, you could have written letters saying, maybe don't come. It's not safe here. But at the same time, it's like there's this practicality as well. Like if you're going to come, these are some things to kind of, to sort of arm you so that you can be prepared.
Yeah, absolutely. And I recall, I think it was at the end of the Time Benders letter. I remember warning the parents not to come. I remember writing that and feeling very, very hopeless and thinking, what, the things that are going on right now, especially at that time when I wrote the letter, Trump had just gotten elected. And so we saw a surge in the number of hate crimes that were taking place just within days after his inauguration. And I remember saying, yeah, don't come. And then, I think the letter thereafter, I don't necessarily take all of it back, but I make an attempt to be more hopeful. So I definitely, there was that reality of going back and forth between feeling hopeful and hopeless. And so most certainly I didn't want to overly romanticize this whole thing, but there's that reality does exist in the letters, this kind of back and forth that we often do. Those who are committed to social justice, to achieving social justice, we're not always hopeful. Sometimes we go back and forth, and the way in which we maintain our strength and maintain our hope is by being in the presence of other people who are trying to move forward and create a better world.
And I think that's true, right? I think even as parents, right, I think we go through that as well, right? There are times when we're like, your kid wants to be independent, right? And I'm thinking about, driving a car or learning how to drive a car, for older kids. And it's kind of like there's this back and forth, like, well, they have to drive, but then there's this fear about what could be coming, right? It's like, all right, you have to talk when you want to have to talk. But at the same time, it's like, in order to move forward, you've got to trust. And that's hard. That's so difficult, right? I think breaking through that fear and anxiety to ultimately, talk about, ending up in love. And the love is like, what? I've got to trust what I've done, let go, and let my child, so it's, like you said, it's like this roller coaster. Well, you didn't say roller coaster, but there are these different changes in our thought patterns and how we're feeling. But ultimately, we've got to have hope, right? We got to have love. Hopefully that trumps everything.
Absolutely.
Now, the one thing I did find interesting is the fact that you infuse a little bit of your own cultural background in the book. I mean, for the most part, the chapters, are kind of like hair, books, self-care, which I think was very important, and I definitely want to talk to you about that. But I think the one thing that was also interesting is you talk about raising a child of mixed culture, ethnicity. And I was curious, like, why was that important for you to share with newcomers? Like, why to write a letter to them about that?
Just in case some of those newcomers from other planets or galaxies were also multiracial of African American descent. I think throughout our history, and certainly in the here and now, we have a number of Black folks who are of biracial or multiracial heritage, and sometimes it doesn't even get spoken about. I think there's also a history within the African American community sometimes to not talk about that other part of one's ethnic identity because there's a perception that it would jeopardize the authenticity of your Blackness. And I really wanted, and that's something that I've experienced. That's something that, I've been very active within the multiracial community and different conferences and things like that, and different anthologies. And so this is one of the common things that come up. And I wanted to make sure that I addressed it in a book like this because most certainly it is, my experience, and I wanted other folks and, my experience, but also my daughter's experience. I wanted other folks that are also multiracial of African-American heritage to have some language around what it means to, one, embrace all the things that you are and live in that in-between space. And understand the sacredness of that in-between space, while at the same time knowing that when one embraces all that we are, it most certainly should not be at the expense of our Blackness. which has also happened. Sometimes people of African-American heritage, multiracial of African-American heritage may say, oh, I'm all these things, I'm all these different ethnic backgrounds. You can't just pigeonhole me and just call me black. And that's, I think that's dangerous because, this is one of the reasons why people are like, well, wait a minute, what exactly are you saying? You don't want to identify with other black people. And so I think there's some validity to those questions as well. So I wanted to really tackle that head on and offer some language as to how, again, you can be both if you're biracial. You can embrace, all that you are. You're more than just two ethnic backgrounds if you're multiracial, but you can also stand for social justice and stand against anti-blackness and have some pride in your African-American heritage and understand the impact of the demonization of blackness that has been so prevalent in the past as well as in the here and now.
I think the other thing too, as you're speaking and reading the book as well, is also having like an understanding that, let's say, again, theoretically, a black person from another planet coming here, right? They also have a different experience, right?
Yeah.
They're going to be the other, and how we perceive them and understand them as a black person, how they express their identity of blackness, right? Their realization of blackness, I think is also very kind of, it's like, it's like very thought-provoking. It's like, okay, this is very deep.
That's true. Yeah, you know what? That's true. Maybe that'll have to be book 2.
Yeah, because can you imagine
the second volume? That's good.
Yeah, because again, like the thought of, intermarriage or with someone from another place, right? It's like how we incorporate our cultures, how we respect those cultures, how we honor those cultures, right? So I think that's very, very deep, very deep.
Yeah, definitely. I like that. Thank you.
And I think lastly, before we end our conversation, I definitely wanted to touch on just follow up about the question about the chapters on self-care and why that was so integral for you to put that into the book as well.
Okay, yeah, definitely. And I think I broke it up into 2 letters. I've always been big on self-care. I started talking about it in my second book, my Midnight Peaches 2 O'Clock Patients book. And at the time, feeling very much on top of everything and just having an extreme amount of clarity. and I remember, that chapter in the earlier book that was called Perfect Ordinary Day. And I wanted to talk about it in this book, but just kind of the changes, the importance of seeing how, we might in one season in our lives be very clear about what it is that we need, what it is that makes us tick, what it is that makes our faces light up and brings us joy. And then we grow, and then we go through all these changes and whatever, and then we discover, wait a minute, we've the things that felt like they fit before, I'm not really into that anymore. And now I have, discovered, okay, work is having a different impact on me. And, what I thought I was so good at saying no to, I'm not exactly as good as I thought I was. And here I am sitting in the ER thinking that I'm so great at self-care when actually I'm not. And so I wanted to share that as a starting point in one of the letters on self-care and what it meant to then find a new self-care regimen, get reacquainted with myself and the new things that make me tick, the new things that bring me to life. And so that that was that first letter dedicated to self-care. And then the second part to it, I wanted to make sure that there was that I incorporated the reality of self-care and being Black, that, it's not so easy to say to Black folk, okay, you know what, take care of yourself, go take a walk, for 30 minutes, and, spend time with your family, go barbecue, whatever. Our doctors may tell us these things, we might tell each other these things, but then when we look at the reality of, I think I mentioned this in this particular chapter, the reality of how our leisurely, the things that we do, our leisurely activities end up being construed as criminal, as suspicious activities, hence, the barbecue Beckys that are calling the cops on folks just trying to barbecue, or, people just trying to fall asleep or take a little nap in a dorm room or hanging out at the coffee shop. That, there are all these ways in which racist people interrupt our flow when we are just trying to relax. And so what does that mean when we already have an idea, and not only do we have an idea, we regularly practice engaging in leisurely activities, but even that gets interrupted by white supremacy. How do we deal with that? And how do we still maintain, our sense of self? And so I wanted to make it grounded in the reality of this anti-Blackness, and then consequently, the urgency of why we need to be there for each other, and we need to insist on self-compassion, on self-acceptance, on loving ourselves, all these different things. And one thing I wish I knew about when I wrote the book, but I didn't learn about it until thereafter, was Girl Trek. And so I probably need to include that in the list of resources I put on my website. But what I did not include in the self-care book was how important Girl Trek is, particularly to Black women. And, following the footsteps of Harriet Tubman, and us, just making that commitment to ourselves as Black women to go out for a walk 30 minutes a day, and for, our own physical health, but also, when we're in the company of each other, be able to listen to each other, counsel each other, be of support to each other. And so, I think that ends up being a really good example of, how necessary it is to take care of ourselves as mothers, take care of ourselves as fathers, take care of each other, as parents, because we have to model this for our babies. How are our babies going to take care of themselves when they don't see us taking care of ourselves? And how are we going to be our best selves for our babies and be patient in all these things if we're not doing the sort of things that make us happy, so that, we're in a healthy space, a healthy state of mind to, laugh when our kid tells a joke or is silly. And so that's everything I had in mind when it came to those self-care letters.
This book really is about love and community, which I think is very, very important, and I think a great resource. And I hope other parents find it a great resource as well.
Absolutely. And again, thank you so much, Jackie, for interviewing me and giving me the chance to talk about the book and the process of writing it and all of that. So again, thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thanks for joining us this week on What is Black podcast. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And for more information about the podcast, our blogs, and subscribe to our upcoming newsletter, go to our website at whatisblack.co. As always, subscribe to the show to catch every new episode. And don't forget to leave us a review so we can continue to bring you fresh content. Until next time, thank you for listening.